There are white settlers in this photograph, but some of these people are half-breed Indians. Can you tell which ones? It's common today for Indians, that is real Indians, to denigrate those of us who are of mixed descent. We're foreigners, American Indians perhaps, but not American Indians. Real Indians look like the Sioux of the High Plains or the Dene of the Plateau, or some other archetype from the TV and movies, like Iron Eyes Cody, the Sicilian-American actor who played the apocryphal Crying Indian in the 1971 Keep America Beautiful TV commercial. Despite that both his parents immigrated from Sicily, Iron Eyes Cody was widely accepted as a real Indian. But the first time that Graham Greene auditioned for the role of Kicking Bird in Dances with Wolves, he was rejected because he didn't look like a real Indian, which is to say he doesn't fit the TV stereotype. But Greene is an Oneida Indian. The Oneida are forest people, and they are American Indians. But they don't fit the stereotype. Neither do many Cherokee, nor do many other Indians. Which brings us back to the Provo family photo. It was taken in the town of Castle Rock in Lewis County in the state of Washington 110 years ago in 1907. I knew 4 of them. None of them look like the stereotype of American Indians, but 10 of the people in this photograph were half Indian. They were half-breeds, half white, half Indian. David Provo, the seated man with the mustache, was the son of a full-blood Tlingit woman. Jean-Baptiste, his father, was a French-Canadian trapper from Quebec who worked for the Hudson's Bay Company. He married Conto of the Stikine River Tlingit, and they had 4 children, including David. David Provo's wife, Mary, seated to his left, was the daughter of John R. Kindred, whose aunt, Elizabeth, was married to Michael T. Simmons. The Kindreds, including David, his wife Talitha, and sister Elizabeth, were members of the party which was bankrolled by George Washington Bush, an African-American businessman. Michael T. Simmons led their party to the state of Washington to establish what is now the city of Tumwater in 1845. They crossed the country to Oregon Territory, and from Fort Vancouver they traveled up to Cowlitz Landing, near the current location of the St. Mary's Cowlitz Elders Housing Center in Toledo, Washington. From there, they spent 15 days making their way up the Cowlitz Trail, or what is now known as Interstate 5, to the falls of the Deschutes River, where David and Talitha, with their 7 children, including son John, age 20, settled. John seemed to be in the habit of marrying too often. While on the trail, he had married a woman of ill fame named Mary King, and later, while there's no record of John Kindred's marriage to Sally Umpkane, a full-blood Chehalis woman, the dissolution of their marriage by passage of a state law is on record in the Thurston County Court. Mary Kindred was their daughter. David Provo and Mary Kindred Provo had 9 children: Sarah, Laura, Raymond, Rose, Belle, John, William, and Frank. Because both their parents were half Indian, that made them half Indian too, 1/4 Tlingit and 1/4 Chehalis. Today, every one of them would have been called foreigner or an American Indian wannabe by many racist Indians and progressive liberal race-baiting leftists, because many Indians of the Pacific Coast don't fit the stereotype. The Provos were not movie Indians. They were real Indians, and so am I. While Indian blood quantum was used as long ago as the early 1700s to ascertain legal rights, that is, if you were too much Indian, then you had few rights, if any, it wasn't until the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, also known as the Wheeler-Howard Act, that blood quantum restrictions were used to determine whether a person was a real Indian. It was in this way that millions of Americans were disenfranchised from their tribal heritage. These are the so-called part Indians. Thanks to these racist policies, they're not considered real Indians at all. Meanwhile, anti-miscegenation laws took a single drop of African American blood as being 1 drop too many to pass for anything other than black. I'm descended from 5 of the people in the Provo family photograph. 3 of them were half Indians by blood quantum. And from that day until today, we have always identified as Cowlitz Indian, despite that until the year 2002, our federal recognition was not acknowledged. As a youth, my racist white teachers looked the other way while I was tormented by my peers, who chased me with rocks and ganged up to beat me up. These teachers told me to sit in the back of the room and not ask questions. They knew I was Indian because when I was 6, my parents said so on a take-home census. In the eyes of the world, I was Indian right up until I graduated from high school. Out in the world, where people didn't know me or my family, I was obviously white. That is, an evil white man, blind to my white privilege, oblivious to how I had oppressed women and minorities for thousands of years. And to many, if not most members of reservation tribes today, I'm still not a real Indian because we do have European blood. And yes, sub-Saharan African blood too, and even a little Jewish blood. Some Indians, those who, like the Sicilian-American actor Iron Eyes Cody, fit the TV stereotype, say we're not real Indians, that we have the wrong hair color, that we're foreigners. Well, about my hair color, I haven't always been 64 years old, and I haven't always been this bald or this gray. Once upon a time, when I wore a much younger man's clothes, I looked like this. Some might say my hair used to be the right color before I started turning gray and bald. So do the racists who say I'm not a real Indian because my hair color is wrong, because I'm not a leftist like the fake Indian Ward Churchill, not a socialist like Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, who thinks her mother was native descent, nor an acolyte of the man-made global warming religion promoted by Al Gore. I say this: at least my tribe, which is a lineal descent tribe, won't die out due to inbreeding, and at least my tribe will remain genetically viable and vigorous, and thrive, to preserve and protect that which is most sacred, to cultivate what progress is needed or necessary, and to lift up to 7 generations to come. Meanwhile, others celebrate their poverty, hate white people who never did them any harm, and squander their legacy to fulfill the French romantic nonsense about le veau sauvage, the noble savage. This is the result of the federal reservation system of the 19th century, which killed the men. That is, the prison camp reservations destroyed the provider-protector role of men and imposed in its place mandatory dependence that has reverberated down through the generations as intergenerational trauma in the form of substance abuse, intimate partner violence, and terribly shortened lifespans. We see the impact of this on the reservations of tribes that cling to the injustices of the past rather than celebrating the good while rising above the bad. When he served as Assistant Secretary of Labor for Policy, Planning, and Research from 1963 to 1965 under Presidents Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote, "From the wild Irish slums of the 19th century eastern seaboard to the riot-torn suburbs of Los Angeles, there is one unmistakable lesson in American history. A community that allows a large number of men to grow up in broken families dominated by women, never acquiring any stable relationship to male authority, never acquiring any set of rational expectations about the future, that community asks for and gets chaos, crime, violence, unrest, disorder, most particularly the furious, unrestrained lashing out at the whole social structure. That is not only to be expected, it is very near to inevitable, and it is richly deserved." He recognized that the same debilitating disease of dependence infected the African American descendants of slaves, and that the welfare program was destroying the provider-protector role of black men, just as the prison camp reservations had done to American Indian men. Indeed, even Martin Luther King spoke out against the welfare program, saying it would be more effective and beneficial to simply provide a guaranteed basic income. A handout, perhaps, but one that would provide a hand up. hundreds of American economists agreed and persuaded President Nixon to implement a guaranteed basic income. But by the time Nixon's staff had run test programs around the country that proved it could be a great success, and the administration was ready to submit the bill to Congress, one of Nixon's advisors persuaded him to turn the program instead into what they called workfare. I was only 17 at the time, but I remember that. It wasn't as elegant as the original plan and likely wouldn't have been as effective, but the plan was approved by the Republican House only to die in the Democratic Senate, leaving the nation saddled with a welfare system that, like the reservations that had started as prison camps but over the generations gradually morphed into cages ringed by virtual bars of dependency, destroyed the role of men, and in the process destroyed the families that were mired in multi-generational poverty. Ignoring that relatively few businesses own the factories, warehouses, offices, and storefronts where they conduct their business, pundits on the right claim that the solution for Indians is to convert the reservations from federal trust to fee patent so that individual Indians can own their homes, thus giving them property they can mortgage to obtain funds with which to start businesses. That was already done to some tribes, however, and all it accomplished was to quickly transfer Indian land from the Indians to deep-pocketed corporations eager to acquire the resources. No, lack of individual land ownership is not the impediment they claim, else Americans would not be starting more than 500,000 new small businesses every month. You don't need to own your house and put it in hock to start a business. The problem is the culture. Cultural Marxists have been doing their best to destroy American families. The problem is the culture. Cultural Marxists have been doing their best to destroy American families. Their purpose is to destroy what made America unique, what made America great. It was not slavery that made America great. Slavery was common throughout the world and down through the ages. It was the West that abolished slavery. Slavery still exists, however, mostly in Africa. But in the West, most of us view it as a barbaric institution. Cultural Marxists, however, want a return to the days of the dependency caused by slavery and the prison camp Indian reservations. They want to eliminate the provider-protector role of men and replace men with the government. So they attack marriage. During the past 40 years, this pernicious assault on men, marriage, and the family has spread to the mainstream, promoted by feminists, amplified by the mainstream media, and codified into law by neoconservative and neoliberal progressive politicians who gleefully turn propaganda into programs and prisons as they wage a war against men and masculinity which, while more or less covert, nonetheless is producing millions of casualties. For Western society, this has been devastating, and everywhere we are beginning to see tens of millions of ordinary citizens rising up in a backlash against the looters and leeches. Donald Trump is a part of that, and this backlash needs to spread to Indian country. During the past several years, I've read many obituaries of Indians, some from my tribe, many from others, and most of these say that this person was a proud member of their tribe. When my time comes and my carcass is laid to rest, I want none of that. Let it be said that I was a man like any other, blessed in some ways, not so much in others, but I was content with my heritage and the dense underbrush of my family tree, grateful for the gift of life passed on to me by each and every one of my ancestors and the great mystery. For each step we take may not be historic, but our lives leave footprints upon an historic path.